Hello everyone, Amy Wilbanks here with Textile Fabric Consultants. In this video, we'll discuss the yarn samples packet, which includes 17 examples of yarns. Hopefully, you've already viewed our video on spun versus filament yarns. This video takes that concept one step further, where we will discuss novelty and specialty yarns. As usual, I'll be referring to information from Textiles by Kadoff and Marchetti. If you have a yarn samples packet, please feel free to get that out now and go along with me in the video. If you don't have one can be purchased on our website. The yarn samples packet includes 17 yarns, the master list, and mounting sheets. The master list contains the yarn name, the fiber content, and the manufacturer if we have that information. The mounting sheets allow you to mount the yarns, record the information from the master list, and describe any information that you learned while studying the yarns. We will not be going in order as the master list. We have grouped the yarns into 4 categories: simple yarns, filament yarns, novelty yarns, and composite yarns. And we will discuss these categories beginning with the simple yarns. The first yarn we'll be discussing is Simple Single, sample number 1 from your packet. This yarn falls under the simple yarn category along with simple ply, cord, and rope. A simple yarn is alike in all its parts and can be spun or filament. The sample in your packet is a spun example. The Simple Single yarn is the most basic form of simple yarns, having only one strand of fibers twisted together. A common end use for these yarns would be sweaters or other similar garments. The second sample in your packet is a simple ply yarn, which is made by twisting together 2 or more simple single yarns. So making ply yarns introduces a second twisting operation. The sample from your packet is made from 2 simple singles, which in this context are called plies, making this a 2-ply yarn. The simple ply is a very common and popular yarn, and it can be found in men's dress shirts, in knits, and in interior textiles. In woven fabrics, ply yarns are sometimes used in the warp direction to increase strength. Up next we have sample 3, the cord yarn. A cord yarn is made from twisting together 2 or more ply yarns, adding a third twisting operation to the production process. The sample from your packet consists of 3 2-ply yarns. A cord yarn can be as small as sewing thread and used in apparel, or as big as rope. They are also found in industrial fabrics such as duck and canvas. Then there is sample 17, braided cord, which is the last simple yarn we'll be covering. This yarn is made by braiding together 3 or more ply yarns and can be found in various forms such as round, flat, or in the case of the sample in your packet, with an inner core of compressed fiber. That's because this sample is clothesline. The inner core is added for strength. Braided cord yarn can also be found in many different industrial applications. The fourth sample is monofilament yarn, one of 3 filament yarns in the packet. Monofilament yarns consist of a single coarse filament fiber, and an easy example of this is fishing line, which is what can be found in your packet. Other uses for this type of yarn are produce bags, other netting, and some sewing threads. Metallic monofilament yarns are used to create sparkle in apparel and interior fabrics, as well as to minimize static electricity for clean rooms and other technical applications. The second filament yarn in your packet is multifilament, which is sample number 5. Multifilament yarn is made exactly how its name suggests, by combining multiple filament fibers into one yarn. The amount of twisting used can vary from no twist at all to a hard twist. As you can see, the sample in your packet has almost no twist in it. These yarns are very common in both apparel and interior applications. A good example of an end use for multifilament yarns is in satin or any other high sheen fabric, which will more than likely utilize multifilament yarns. The last filament yarn we have to discuss is sample number 11, tape yarn. This yarn is very inexpensive to produce, made from an extruded polymer film, and as you can see, it's somewhat translucent. Tape yarn is used very often for carpet backings, but can also be found in things such as produce bags. The next 8 yarns we'll be discussing are going to fall under the broader category of novelty or fancy yarns, which can be a bit more tricky to identify, so hopefully this segment can clear up any confusion. Novelty yarns, by definition, are composed of multiple parts which are deliberately unlike, and at regular intervals along the yarn you'll find irregularities such as loops, knots, or slubs. This is meant to create visual interest and make for novel effect, giving the yarn type its name. Often, the different components are broken down into 3 categories of ply: the ground ply, the effect ply, and the binder ply. The ground ply forms the foundation for the yarn, while the effect ply is primarily responsible for the yarn's name and appearance. The binder ply simply serves to bind all yarn components together, and would be the first ply you'd unravel when disassembling a novelty yarn. These 3 categories are a good baseline for understanding novelty yarns, but it's important to note that all 3 types will not be present in all novelty yarns. For more information, please refer to page 258 of Textiles to read more about the characteristics and performance of novelty yarns. For our first novelty yarn, we are looking at sample number 6, the spiral corkscrew yarn. This yarn type is made from 2 or more plies, which may vary in their twist, size, and color. It also features a prominent spiraling binder ply. As you can see, the given sample has a smaller binder ply with a much tighter twist than the 2 large ground plies it's spiraling around. And obviously there is a difference in color between the red and white. This is a good example of a novelty yarn that doesn't have all 3 categories of ply, as this yarn has no effect ply. Spiral yarns are used in both apparel and interior design fabrics, which is common among novelty yarns. The next novelty yarn is sample number 7, slub yarn, which is also known as a thick and thin yarn. This yarn type is characterized by thicker sections or slubs at regular intervals along the yarn, as can be seen on the sample from your packet here. This sample is an example of a slub yarn that uses variants of twist strength to create its slubs. The thin sections have a tight twist, whereas the slubs are loose, allowing the relaxed material to bulge out. Thick and thin yarns can also be created by simply varying the amount of fiber used along the yarn, putting more in the slubs. These types of yarns can be found in shantung fabrics, drapery and upholstery fabrics, and in hand-knitted sweaters. The next yarn, sample number 8, is the flake, flock, or seed yarn. It is also known as a tweed yarn, and it's a single-spun novelty yarn. The sample in the packet is a ply yarn consisting of 4 tweed yarns twisted together. As the yarn is being twisted, little specks of colored fiber are added along the yarn to create the effect you see here. These can actually be pulled out with just your fingernails, which gives you a hint that it is a tweed yarn. This yarn is very commonly used in both apparel and upholstery fabrics. Sample 9, the loop curl or boucle loop yarn, is one of my favorite yarns. It is characterized by closed loops at regular intervals along the length of the yarn. I just love the appearance of this yarn, and you can see here on our sample the closed loops that give it its name. It's used a lot in wool and mohair fabrics. It helps create a very pretty, lofty look in sweaters, jackets, and other apparel. Our next yarn is sample 10, the chenille yarn, which is made by cutting specially woven fabric into strips in the warp direction. This yarn is very soft and pleasant to the touch, and when you handle it, you'll notice a fuzzy texture on both sides. It is distinctly different from other novelty yarns, making it one of the easier ones to identify. Chenille yarns are very prevalent in the interior design industry for use in couches, chairs, and accents like throws and pillow trims. It can also be found in apparel for things like sweaters. The next yarn is the eyelash yarn, which is sample 14. Eyelash is another unique type of yarn with a very fun appearance, making it easy to identify. It's made by braiding multiple yarns together with one yarn, the effect ply, intentionally having long protruding ends. This creates the eyelash effect. Eyelash yarns can commonly be found in apparel, but you will also see them in interior design for trims and shears. Next, we will look at sample 15, the snarl or spike yarn. This yarn is characterized by having open loops in the effect ply on alternating sides of the ground ply. The snarl or spike yarn is similar to the boucle loop yarn, but the effect ply is formed by areas of high twisting on itself instead. This yarn can be found in interior design for things like trims and curtains, or in apparel for things like sweaters. The last novelty yarn from your kit is the knot, spot, or nub yarn, which is sample 16. This yarn is defined by having knots at intervals along itself, which may vary in size. They are made by twisting one of the yarns many times onto itself, and the knots are often different colors, like our sample here. This is another visually interesting yarn that can be found in both fashion and interior design fabrics. There's one more novelty yarn I'd like to cover that isn't in your samples packet. It's called the ratiné yarn, and it's characterized by having an effect ply that spirals around the ground ply and at intervals will kick out to form longer loops that kink back on themselves. This yarn is another yarn which will be found in both fashion and interior design fabrics. The only composite yarn we have to discuss is sample number 12, which is core spun. Composite yarns are regular in appearance along their length and have both staple and filament fiber components. Core spun is essentially a sheath of staple fibers encasing a stretchy inner core, such as spandex or rubber. This is a yarn you'll find much more in apparel than in interior design, especially in foundation garments to make them more comfortable against the skin. Our last yarn sample, number 13, is twisted paper, and it doesn't fall into any previous categories. It is as simple as the name suggests. It's just twisted paper. You can twist it in the opposite direction to see how tight the twists are. You would find this mostly in gift wrapping, tied in bows, or as the handle on a gift bag. Hopefully this video has helped you learn more about the yarn samples packet and how to identify yarns. If you have questions, please feel free to contact me using the information on the screen. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any textile concept videos.